Yeah, it's time to mess up some of y'all childhoods with these Mandela effects, all right? Let's get into them.
The Mandela effect is a very strange phenomenon that occurs all over the world, where a large group of people remember a certain event happening a certain way, only to find out that they all share a false memory. These memories include song lyrics, the day that someone passed away, and even certain brand logos that look nothing like they remember. Number 10. Freddie Mercury is considered by many to not only be the greatest singer, but also the greatest showman of all time.
Why do we have to start with Freddie? No. Y'all can't ruin Freddie Mercury, bro. It's not possible. I don't care what they say. It's not ruined. You can't ruin a legend.
As he's remembered today as the eccentric and very talented frontman for the band Queen. The band's song Bohemian Rhapsody has been voted by listeners as one of the best songs ever written, since it was considered to be very different from anything that had been produced before, and it remains a fan favorite to this day. All in all, the band released 15 full-length studio albums, along with 10 live albums, and an array of singles and other songs, all of which proved hugely popular with their fans. But sadly, on the 24th of November, 1991, Mercury passed away after a lengthy battle with illness. Today, he's remembered for his flamboyant style, as well as his larger-than-life presence on and off the stage, with many artists citing him as major influences on their careers, including Kurt Cobain, Dave Grohl, and more mainstream artists such as Katy Perry. His passing had a profound effect on other artists in the music industry, since he'd become a household name all across the world. And although most people were aware of his failing health, it still came as a shock when the news of his passing came to light. While Mercury is well remembered, the same can't be said for one of the songs that Queen released in 1977, entitled We Are the Champions, an anthem that was intended to get the audience singing along at their concerts that usually attracted substantial crowds.
I think I remember this one. I think I might have seen this one floating around before. If they're talking about the ending, yeah, this is going to be controversial.
Most people remember the song ending with the words, "We are the champions of the world." But the reality is that the last three words were never sung at the end of the song on its original release, leaving many people doubting their own memories, since they're convinced that they remember the song ending in this fashion. It's a Mandela effect mystery that has left many people scratching their heads, but it's now come to light that there might actually be a plausible explanation for this, as has been pointed out by many internet users. If you were one of the fans who heard the song for the first time after buying their album News of the World, you'll remember the song simply ending with the line, "We are the champions." But if you heard it on the release of their greatest hits CD, you'll be more familiar with the song ending with the words, "of the world." It isn't known why this change was made with the later release, but it explains why so many people were affected by this Mandela effect mystery. Some people would go as far to say that this isn't an example of the Mandela effect, but it would be a stretch to assume that they were all fooled by two different releases, since not everyone would have heard both versions of the song. A more likely explanation would be that since the "of the world" section is sung at the end of each chorus, except the very last one on the original release, they merely expect the song to end this way, since they're erroneously remembering the first few choruses, something that could very easily happen with a catchy song such as this one. Whatever the case may be, the song lives on in both rock and pop music history, and thanks to its anthemic sound, continues to inspire those who hear it, whether they...
Don't say whatever the case may be, because I feel like you're downplaying this. That's a very crucial part of the song. And if somebody told you that was never there, you'd be like, you're a liar. Because I can tell you, I can hear him in my head of how it sounded, that riff at the end when he says "of the world." So you can't tell us that. No, that is important, vital to that song. No, but I will say this is the first video though that came back and gave explanation as to why we were hearing two different versions, and some people probably never heard the version that we were referring to. So shout outs to them for that. But most of the other times I'm just hearing that it was never there.
know all the lyrics or not. Number 9. There are very few households around the world that are not familiar with the board game Monopoly. While the game is a lot of fun to play, it can also be very divisive, especially among those who take it a little too seriously. It's also the source of one of the most prominent Mandela effects, but few people know that its creation also has a complicated history, since it wasn't always known as Monopoly, but started out as the landlord's game. The first version was created by a woman named Elizabeth Maggie, and the patent for her game was granted on the 5th of January, 1904. In her own words, the game was intended to show a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing with all its usual outcomes and consequences. The game would eventually be published by the Economic Game Company of New York, after it was established by Elizabeth and a few others in 1906. It was only in 1932 that street names were added to the board when a new version was released by the Ad Game Company. This version was also known by the name of Prosperity. By 1920, the game had evolved further and was much closer to the version that we know today. Firstly, it was now known as Monopoly after undergoing a few name changes. It now also included real-world street names, and players had the opportunity to add buildings to their owned properties, making the game more complicated, but also much more exciting. In 1933, a man named Charles Darrow created an improved version of the game, and he copyrighted it to his name, making him a very rich man since the sale of the game skyrocketed with its improved packaging and enhanced design. 1936 saw the introduction of Mr. Monopoly, also known as Milburn Rich Uncle Pennybags, the character that's synonymous with the game, and this is where the Mandela effect comes into play. Most people will tell you that the character has a white mustache, wears a top hat along with the rest of his smart dress sense, and he also wears a monocle. But this is where they're wrong. Mr. Monopoly has never worn a monocle, despite the insistence by many fans of the game that they distinctly remember his image and that it included said monocle. It might be that people remember him that way since the game deals with money and acquiring as much of it as possible.
Do you know every time, because we've played the game as a family here recently a few times, and let me go and say that is one of the longest games you'll ever play. But we played here recently, right? And every time I look at a box now, I'm looking for the monocle. I'm looking for it because I know him to have always had it. I played that game ever since I was a kid. So I'm always looking for it. Them telling me he didn't have it, you're a liar.
Since monocles are often associated with wealth, it would make sense for Mr. Monopoly to wear one. But the reality is that it simply isn't the case. It's also been suggested that the Mr. Monopoly character is being confused with that of Mr. Peanut, the mascot of the Planters Snack Food Company, which is owned by Hormel, since he does indeed wear a monocle and also carries a cane, just like the Monopoly mascot. It's also been suggested that he's often confused with Julius Pringle, the mascot for the Pringles Potato Chip Company, but this is yet another error, since he also doesn't wear a monocle. Number 8. In the world of movies, there's one accolade that stands out above the rest: the Oscars. While some actors have won this award multiple times, there are many others who, while being very talented at their craft, have been overlooked or have had the bad luck of ending up in the same category as another even better actor. One of these actors is Leonardo DiCaprio, who's probably best known for his role in the hugely successful film Titanic, in which he portrays the role of Jack Dawson, a struggling artist and third-class passenger aboard the ship, who eventually falls in love with Kate Winslet's character, Rose. The film was hugely successful, and many fans felt that DiCaprio deserved an Oscar for his acting performance, but it wasn't meant to be. He was nominated for Oscars in the past for his roles in the movies What's Eating Gilbert Grape, The Aviator, Blood Diamond, and The Wolf of Wall Street, but left empty-handed. But his Oscar drought came to an end in 2016 when he won the Best Actor award for his role in the movie The Revenant, and his fans were obviously delighted. But there were many people who believed that this was his second win. In another case of the Mandela effect, many internet users took to their social media accounts to state that he'd won yet another Oscar, only to be told that it was his first one, and that he'd never received the award before. This caused a lot of confusion, since people claimed to remember his acceptance speech at the previous ceremony where he had won,
I have to bow out on this one, y'all. Y'all actually keep up with how many Oscars a person has won? I don't have enough room in my brain to keep up with that one. So, salute to y'all for that. I don't have the capacity.
And they even took to the internet to search for this speech, but obviously came up empty-handed. Others stated that when they saw him accepting his award, they felt a strong sense of déjà vu, since his acceptance speech sounded eerily similar to his previous one. They were reminded that DiCaprio had won a BAFTA award in the past, and that they might be confusing the two ceremonies, but they were adamant that they were recalling the Oscars. Others referred to the outfit that he was wearing while accepting the reward, stating that it was also similar to the one that he'd worn during his last win. But it was suggested that he likely wore a similar outfit while accepting one of his other awards in the past. There's a similar case to be made with another actor, Johnny Depp, who many people feel must have won an Oscar at some point in his career, since the movies that he stars in are typically very well received, and because he's considered to be a great actor. But the reality is that he never won an Oscar, despite being nominated for the award 3 times, in 2004, 2005, and again in 2008. Many of his fans are surprised when they learn that he has never won, but chances are that he will eventually take the award home.
How do you not win an Oscar for the movie Blow? I just watched that 2 weeks ago, a week ago, something like that. Still a classic movie, Boston George. Come on, how does he not win an Oscar for that? If you've never seen it, go back and watch that. I'm telling you, you'll see what I'm saying.
As for the DiCaprio case, there are even people who state on online threads such as Reddit that they believe there's been some kind of slip in our timeline, since they cannot get over the fact that he's only won once. The reality is that the film industry is a very competitive one, and considering the amount of movies that are released each year, there's bound to be at least one actor who's overlooked, sometimes for a very long time, no matter how talented they are. Number 7. There are very few film franchises that have as devoted and knowledgeable a following as Star Wars. Since the first of these movies was released in May of 1977, it's been hailed by science fiction fans as one of the best film franchises to ever be produced, though the more modern releases are less popular. The films have many iconic scenes that not only kept fans entertained, but often sat on the edge of their seats as good battled evil on unique landscapes and never-before-seen spacecraft that appealed to the imaginations of millions of moviegoers. Not many people know that the actor Mark Hamill, who plays the character of Luke Skywalker, was involved in a serious car accident before one of the movies, The Empire Strikes Back, was filmed, and that George Lucas, the film's director, was almost forced to change the script since he was worried that Hamill would have facial scars that would have to be explained. But luckily, he made a full recovery before filming started. It's also a little-known fact that the Emperor who appears in the film was played by a woman, special effects artist Rick Baker's wife, Elaine. The character's voice was that of Clive Revel, but the physical performance was acted out by Baker's wife. Undoubtedly, the most famous scene in the movie, even among those who aren't dedicated fans, is when Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, the film's antagonist, face off in a lightsaber battle, while Luke is still under the impression that Vader ended his father's life. In this iconic scene, Skywalker accuses Vader of this very act, but is then surprised by Vader's revelation that he is, in fact, Skywalker's father. And you may have even quoted the line yourself as, "Luke, I am your father." But this is once again a Mandela effect that has played tricks on people's minds. The actual line in the film is, "No, I am your father," a fact that's left many people in disbelief, as even some of the most hardened Star Wars fans were convinced that it was the former line. It could be that the line was simply misheard by most people, thanks to the strange nature of Vader's voice, or that adding the name Luke to the line when quoting the movie adds context. But the reality is that one of the most quoted movie lines in all of film history is usually misquoted. Number 6. The Mandela effect isn't just reserved for misheard lyrics, misquoted movie lines, and company mascots, as it's often observed when people think back to images from their childhoods, whether they represent food companies, clothing brands, or even famous paintings. As is evidenced by the fact that many people recall seeing a turkey leg in a painting of Henry VIII when there's never been one. Some examples include the Oscar Mayer food brand that many people are convinced was actually spelled M-E-Y-E-R rather than M-A-Y-E-R at some point in the past. But this is likely because the actual spelling is far less common. Then there's debate around a famous brand of peanut butter that most people seem to remember being called Jiffy, but they're shocked when they learn that it's always been called Jif, not Jiffy. Most people who try to explain this false memory think it's likely because people are getting confused between other brands such as Jiffy popcorn and Skippy peanut butter.
All I can remember is the commercial ending, and it said, how it go? Choosy moms choose Jif. So on that one, I'm thinking they're right about it being Jif, but that's based off of me just trying to recall the commercial that I used to hear a lot when I was younger, and it ended, choosy moms choose Jif. What if that's the commercial for something totally different than peanut butter? If that's the case, then disregard what I just said. But I think that's the commercial for it, though, really.
And it's easy to see why this could happen, since Skippy is a far catchier name, and hence much easier to recall. Another of these misremembered brands is a hugely famous cereal brand that most of us would have eaten plenty of when we were kids, Kellogg's Fruit Loops, being spelled with a double O in the word fruit, while thousands of people are convinced that it was actually spelled as fruit, F-R-U-I-T. This is one of the easier Mandela effects to explain, since we use the word fruit all the time, and so expect it to be spelled in the traditional way. But it's hard to believe that thousands of children looked at this cereal box day after day without realizing that it had an alternate spelling. A similar Mandela effect can be seen in the spelling of the cartoon franchise Looney Tunes. Since it deals with weird and wacky cartoon characters, it's easy to understand why someone would expect the spelling of tune to be T-O-O-N, but it's always been spelled as T-U-N-E, and has never changed. But there's one brand whose name has become virtually synonymous with the Mandela effect, the clothing brand called Fruit of the Loom. Millions of people have bought their products and have seen their logos on a near daily basis, and yet they're sure that it was changed at some point. Most people remember the logo consisting of a bunch of fruit, a red apple, a bunch each of purple and green grapes, gooseberries, and green leaves tightly packed into a cornucopia that can be seen in the background. But once again, the reality is that this is a false memory. The logo has never contained a cornucopia, a fact that has since been reiterated by the company itself, since it's been inundated with queries from people who refuse to accept that the logo has always remained the same.
Y'all forcing my brain to go back to the tidy whitey days. And back in the tidy whitey days, I want to say that it had the cornucopia. It had that when your mom and there, she would dress you and you had to put those tidy whities on. I think it was on the tidy whities, right? That and the t-shirts, right? Yeah, I think it had the cornucopia.
Memory is so vivid with some people that one TikTok user named Nicole made it her mission to find the original logo, and some of her videos on the subject have received hundreds of thousands of views. In the comments section of her videos, viewers have expressed their disbelief that there was never a cornucopia on the logo, with some going as far as to state that there's some kind of foul play involved. One commenter suggested that it's one big marketing ploy, and that the original logo was changed with the sole purpose of starting a conversation about the brand. And if this were true, it was certainly successful. Another stated that they didn't even know what a cornucopia was before they saw the Fruit of the Loom logo, and that they took this as proof that the logo was changed at some point. A short while after Nicole's videos started to go viral online, they were suddenly being removed, and it would then come to light that this was due to complaints that were made by the company. They tried to make light of the situation by commenting, "While there was never a cornucopia, we love the dedication," but continued to report the videos since it wasn't a fair representation of the brand. Adding fuel to the fire, another commenter stated that they knew the cornucopia was previously included in the logo, since they lived in the same town as the company's headquarters, and they saw the logo all over their hometown while they were growing up. But the reality is, if the company had changed its logo at some point, there'd be no reason to hide it, since they're already very well known in many countries around the world. Number 5. Geography isn't for everyone. While it's easy to remember exactly where large continents like Africa and South America lie on the map of the world, there are many smaller countries that most people would struggle to locate unless they have a passion for the subject. While most of us would be relatively confident in pointing out Australia when asked to do so, it seems that there's a large group of people who are convinced that New Zealand used to be located in a different area on the map, as impossible as that may seem. If you were to look at a globe of the world, you would find New Zealand southeast of Australia, in the same spot that it's always been. But some people aren't so sure, and some have even gone as far as to suggest the outlandish theory that the country has shifted its position, much to the amusement of those who live there. One woman from California took to the internet to explain her confusion, stating that she distinctly remembers New Zealand lying to the west of Australia. She added that she bought a globe of the world 16 years ago, and on one occasion she started thinking about Australia and New Zealand, since she didn't know much about either country. To remedy this, she decided to find them on the globe so that she would remember their positions in the future. And when she located New Zealand, she made a mental note that it lies just west of Australia. Needless to say that she was shocked when sometime later she learned that it's actually situated to the south, and that she was mistaken despite her mental note to the contrary. And she isn't the only one. One Reddit user took to the platform to state that they're well-educated, well-traveled, and that they've lived in several different countries during their life. They'd even won a plaque as an award for geography while they were in school. But when they looked at a globe of Earth recently, they were flabbergasted to learn that they'd misremembered New Zealand's location for decades. They added that as soon as they realized this, it felt like someone had pulled the rug out from under them, since they'd always had a keen interest in geography and had never made this kind of mistake before. Then there are those who have taken this Mandela effect case to an entirely different level, going as far as to claim that the country has, in their opinion, shifted position without anyone being aware of it. But this is an easy case to disprove. If you were to compare a current map of the world to one that was printed a few decades ago, you would indeed find New Zealand in the exact same spot that it lies today. These claims have been met with a mixture of reactions online, with many New Zealanders finding it humorous that someone from the United States would try to convince them that their own country is now situated in a different area.
Listen, when it comes to the map, the globes, and everything that we've come to know throughout the years that we were taught in school, we just went in it blindly trusting that that's what it is. What they told us is what it is. The map, and it looks just like this. We've never verified it ourselves or anything. We just blindly went with what they told us. And I think that's a huge problem. Because what if we do figure out it does not look like this? It is completely different. I think we need to start coming to terms with the fact that that's a possibility, that what we were told is wrong.
While many others have weighed in and agreed that they also remember the map being different when they were younger, it's likely just because their geographical knowledge is limited, or because they've shared a false memory of the world map. Whatever the case may be, it certainly isn't because an entire country shifted its position, since this would have been a global event unlike any other that we've witnessed before. Number 4. There's no doubt that Disney is one of the biggest entertainment franchises in the world, as it boasts some of the most famous cartoon characters ever created in its repertoire, including Mickey and Minnie Mouse, Winnie the Pooh, Donald Duck, and Tinker Bell the Fairy, to name just a few. But it's also one of the largest sources of Mandela effect mysteries, likely because the company has been producing cartoons for many decades, and hence has also created thousands of characters, some of which are better remembered than others. The first example of this is also a very understandable one. It originates from the 1963 animated Disney movie called The Sword and the Stone, which recalls the legendary tale of Merlin and King Arthur. Most of us are familiar with the tale. Merlin finds Arthur and believes that he'll be the next king of Britain. He then leads him to Excalibur, a sword that can only be removed from a stone by one worthy of being a king, and Arthur proceeds to do just that. So it comes as no surprise that most people who have seen the movie recall a young, blonde-haired boy pulling Excalibur from a large boulder. But quite inexplicably, this isn't what happened in the movie. For some reason, despite the film's title, Arthur is actually shown pulling the sword from an anvil, something that's caused a lot of confusion. But this may be a question of logic rather than a Mandela effect case. One case that many people feel is a Mandela effect mystery, though, concerns Walt Disney himself. He's often quoted as coining the phrase, "If you can dream it, you can do it," and thousands of his fans argue that he first said it during A Wonderful World of Walt Disney broadcast, but they're wrong. In reality, the phrase was uttered by Imagineer Tom Fitzgerald 17 years after Walt Disney passed away, much to the disbelief of many people who are adamant that they remember the phrase as children. But by far, the most misquoted Disney line comes from the animated movie Snow White. In one scene, the antagonist, the evil queen, can be seen standing in front of her magical mirror, and she says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" Not many people would argue with this, since most of us have seen the film multiple times, even as adults while our own children watch it. But you may be surprised to learn that she never said this phrase, at least not exactly as it's remembered. If you were to review the movie today, you would hear the evil queen saying, "Magic mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?"
No, y'all can't do that one either. You can't have that one either. It was "Mirror, mirror on the wall." Stop it. And I heard little girls growing up that were in school with me in the same grade say the same thing over and over after they went home and watched it and came back to school. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is that?" You'd be outside playing. They would say it like, no, bro. Y'all can't have that one either.
To be fair, this is the line that she's always delivered, but for some reason, most of us remember it as "mirror, mirror" instead. This could simply be because it's easier for our brains to remember a repeated word rather than an alliterative phrase. Or it could be that we've heard the line being misquoted for so long that our memory of the original phrase has faded to the point where it seems as though it never existed in the first place. When one TikTok user discovered that she remembered the line wrong, she took to her TikTok account and jokingly posted a video in which she asked if she'd slipped into an alternate reality. But the response was overwhelming, and in a short amount of time, it had been viewed over 10 million times as people started realizing that they also had a false memory of the scene, with some stating that their childhoods had been shattered by the revelation. If this wasn't strange enough, the line also doesn't end with the phrase, "Who's the fairest of them all," as most people remember it. Instead, the queen actually says, "Who's the fairest one of all?" Number 3. The Scream is a very famous painting created by artist Edvard Munch in 1893. And today it's kept in the National Museum in Oslo, where members of the public have a chance to view it for themselves. But the painting has a very strange and interesting history that not everyone is aware of. For example, most people would understandably assume that there's just one copy of the work, but the fact is that there are 4. While creating the original painted piece, Munch also created a second that was sketched in crayon. Then, 2 years later in 1895, he created yet another version, this time in pastel. And in 1910, he added a 4th that was painted in tempera paints. Furthermore, while we all know the piece by the title The Scream, that's not its original name. Since the painting doesn't actually depict a person screaming, but rather someone shielding their ears from the scream of Mother Nature, it was originally entitled The Scream of Nature. There's also a little-known fact that the painting served as inspiration for the villain in the famous Scream movies that was directed by Wes Craven and released in 1996, as is evidenced by the mask that he wears throughout. It also served as inspiration for the terrifying alien creatures called the Silence that can be seen in the hugely popular science fiction series Doctor Who, according to the show's executive producer, Stephen Moffat. Lastly, not many people know that the painting has been stolen multiple times. On the first of these occasions, which took place in 1994, robbers entered the National Gallery in Oslo by merely using a ladder that was leaned up against the outside wall. They then dropped into the gallery, stole the painting, and left a note thanking the gallery for its lack of security, since this made their job much easier. The painting was found again 3 months later and returned to its rightful spot. But in 2004, it would be stolen again, after armed robbers entered the gallery and took possession of it. 3 men would eventually be sent to prison as a result. With so many strange tales being connected to this painting, it'll come as no surprise that it's often mentioned when talking about the Mandela effect, not only for one reason, but for 2. The first is easily debunked, since some people claim to remember that it was originally created by Vincent van Gogh. but it's general knowledge that Munch is the one and only artist responsible. The second is a little more ambiguous, since people have recently started coming forward and admitting that they've never noticed the gold bracelet that can be seen on the figure's right wrist. One Reddit user stated that they'd seen the painting hundreds of times before, and they were certain that the bracelet wasn't there before, though this is of course impossible since it's never been altered. Most people likely missed this detail because it isn't the focal point of the painting, and it's rarely mentioned in descriptions, despite being one of the most famous paintings ever created. Number 2. The movie Star Wars: The Force Awakens was released in December of 2015, and to say that it was successful would be a massive understatement. To this day, it holds the title of being the top-grossing movie in US history, which is quite a feat considering some of the other best-selling movies that have been released, including Avengers Endgame and Avatar, which were both huge successes in their own right. It also broke a slew of other US records that included the biggest Thursday preview of all time, the biggest Friday ever recorded, the biggest single-day gross of any movie ever produced, and it was the first movie ever to gross more than $100 million in just one day. It then reached the $200 million gross mark faster than any other film, further cementing it as one of the most successful movies ever to be produced. It even outperformed its hugely popular prequels, which were received with mixed reviews. But despite the film being viewed by millions of people all over the world, many are only now learning that they missed a small detail concerning one of the most beloved characters, C-3PO, the golden humanoid robot. Many fans were shocked to learn that the robot is in fact not entirely gold, as one of its legs is actually silver. Since there are many dedicated Star Wars fans out there who assume they knew everything there is to know about the movies, it sent them reeling when they discovered that they were, in fact, wrong. There are also multiple theories as to why C-3PO has mismatched limbs. One suggestion is that the suit was very tight and uncomfortable, and that the original gold leg plate split at one point, after which it was replaced with a silver one. Others believe it was completely intentional, since George Lucas wanted the Star Wars universe to look as authentic as possible. Since many of the ships and other vehicles in the movies appear to have been fashioned from spare parts, it would make sense that if a robot were to lose a leg, it would simply be replaced by whatever material was on hand, and hence he ended up with a silver leg. But viewers were at a loss as to how they could have so easily overlooked such a glaring detail, since the movies are constantly being discussed in online forums, YouTube videos, and even dedicated fan sites. The explanation is much simpler than you might think. Since much of the filming for the movies was done in Tunisia, especially in desert areas, the sand from the desert is easily reflected by the silver limb, and hence it makes it look a lot like the robot's other leg, making it easy to miss. Since this discovery, many Star Wars fans have asked online forums whether there's a backstory that goes with C-3PO's silver leg, but it would seem that there isn't, though many people have stated that this was a missed opportunity by Lucas to add even more character development to the story. The film franchise is known to contain many instances of the Mandela effect, likely because there are so many little details in each of the movies, and anyone would be hard-pressed to remember them all. After all, even some of the most dedicated Star Wars fans were unaware of this particular detail, until they were made aware of it by internet users, and hence it's likely that there are even more Star Wars Mandela effects that have yet to surface. Number 1. The Star Wars franchise has a massive following, but the same can be said for another hugely popular science fiction series, Star Trek, which first aired on television in September of 1966. And it was an immediate hit with television audiences. Since then, it's only grown in stature, and fans can still be seen online debating which of the captains was their favorite, though the majority lean towards Captain Kirk or Captain Picard. The series captivated its viewers as it followed the exploits of the Starship Enterprise and its crew that was always looking to find new and exciting areas of our universe to explore.
Like, hindsight, looking at this now in this day and age, you're like, what were y'all watching? You know what I mean? But if you go back in time to around that time, bro, somebody would probably fight you if you turn their Star Wars off. Like, seriously.
And almost always involved some element of danger. Die-hard fans of the franchise usually enjoy most of the show's episodes, though there are some who refuse to watch any episodes after the first series that starred William Shatner in the role of Captain Kirk. Similarly, some fans are dedicated to the ship's second captain, Pickard, played by Sir Patrick Stewart, with some fans stating that they enjoyed the more modern look of the show and the new characters that were introduced. One element of the show that stayed the same between the two series is the transporter technology that's used on the ship. It could transport any member of the crew to a nearby planet and back aboard again while causing no ill effects, as long as it was used correctly. Fans of the show quickly became familiar with these transporters, since it was unlike anything they'd seen before. The thought that someone could relocate miles away at the touch of a button seemed completely fantastical, and at the same time, very alluring. On many occasions, it came to the crew's rescue, as they were beamed back aboard the Enterprise in the nick of time, just before an enemy was about to strike or as a natural disaster took place on a planet that they were exploring. This also gave rise to one of the most quoted lines in all of television history, uttered by the ship's first captain, Kirk. But this is yet another case of the Mandela effect, and one of the most famous. Just about every fan of the show has at some point quoted the line, referring to the ship's chief engineer, Montgomery Scott, better known simply as Scotty, while Kirk was part of an away team on a planet that they were exploring. While the particular episode is never mentioned, viewers distinctly remember Kirk saying, "Beam me up, Scotty," after which the familiar sound of the transporter could be heard, followed by the strange beams that converted their bodies into an energy pattern.
Now listen, I didn't even watch the show like that. And I remember, because I've heard it in music lyrics, people used it in music lyrics. Beam me up, Scotty. Beam me up, or different things. People used it in different references on shows. Like, that gotta be the quote.
Then converted back into matter aboard the ship. But it's since come to light that these words were never spoken in any of the Star Trek episodes, not by Captain Kirk or anyone else on the crew, though there were a few variations of this line. Crew members are regularly heard saying the phrase, "Mr. Scott, 3 to beam up," or "Energize, Mr. Scott," after which the teleporter is started up. But that exact phrase has never been uttered by any crew member in any of the series. Many of the show's fans found this impossible to believe, and they scoured old episodes to prove that Kirk did indeed say this line at some point, but they obviously came up empty. It's now considered to be one of the most famous misquotes in all of television history.